Please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment where you are watching in the world. Please submit your horror dating stories by our email in the description to us. You will also be entered into our $10 monthly prize. Tinder. Yes, yet another Vietnam flashback for a lot of people out there. I didn't want a Tinder. I'm not sexually active, plus I know a vast majority of people use it to hook up. I was like 19, so I couldn't go out get a drink yet, and I played it safe. I had to, living at my dad's, on top of not able to drive. So the unfortunate circumstances they would sometimes meet my parents. I'm gonna tell you this because this was fucking terrible. I matched with a guy who just got back from deployment. He was friendly and seemed like a good dude all around. Before a date or anything we added one another on social media. To grasp what kind of person they were in game online. Didn't want to sleep with me right away, that was the vibe I got. Friday night rolls around, and it's busy. We're in College Town. Goes to Texas Roadhouse, and I got myself into a real pickle. So I'm 5 feet 11 inches. The guy is easily 5 feet 3 inches. Place was packed, and tried to have a conversation, and I can barely hear him. He tries to order me a salad, which I don't like salad. So big fat nope. After food, go back out to his truck. It's lifted, and sit inside. We were gonna go to a movie, but I was having second thoughts. And he went in to kiss me. I don't believe in kissing on the first date. And let me just describe how awful it was. For one, too much tongue. I have a repulsive gag reflex. And I was having so much trouble trying not to throw up. Like it was so wet, it felt like walking in downpour rain with the amount of saliva this man put on my mouth. It was like kissing a fish with a dog's tongue. And he was holding me down. I couldn't get him off of me. When he finally stopped, he was like, "I love you. And am I a good kisser?" I had to lie through my teeth. And I told him I wanted to go home. I didn't know the area well enough. And instead of taking me home, took me to a movie. He chose 50 Shades Darker. I've seen the other movies, there wasn't a lot of sex scenes. And I swallowed my fear. And I shouldn't have. I tried to run out of the theater. He wouldn't let me leave. And I am very socially awkward and big ball of nervous. I stomached through the whole movie. I told him I was ready to go home. And he said he needed to put his food away before taking me home. And I said okay, but I want to go home after. So he shows me his house. It's flooded. About 3 inches of water, and it's freezing. I have arthritis, and I literally can't move if things are way too cold. So I had mobility issues. He sees it, and ignores it, and goes into his room, and I'm waiting for like 10 minutes. I'm like, "Hey, can you take me home, please?" Doesn't respond. His dog comes rushing out, and jumps on me, knocks me down into the water spread throughout the house. So I'm soaked. I'm like, "Can I have some help?" And he apologizes like I am so sorry. He just gets so excited. I said it's okay, but can you still take me home? I know having people over with all this water is probably not a good idea. Completely ignores my comment. Turns on his Xbox and logs me on. My friends see I'm online and start messaging me and invite me online to talk thinking I'm home. I talked to my buddy Bass and told him, "Hey, I'm not home. I'll be home in about 45 minutes. And asked me how it was going. My friends know when it's bad just with how I word things. And my date started getting irritated. I'm talking to another man and turns off his Xbox. He says, "I don't want to share you with anybody. I want to keep you mine." So I'm very scared and trying to keep calm and not think about how high my anxiety is. Give 0 red flags. I ask again, "Can you take me home?" He said, "I wanted you to stay." I said I have medical conditions I can't ignore, and I have a doctor's appointment the next day. Huge lie with small truths, still wouldn't let me leave. Tried to fake a bladder infection, which worked partially. Still wouldn't let me leave. Given the situation I was in. I stayed. Took me home the next day. Before dropping me off, said he wanted me to make me his wife. And I ghosted him to hell. I walked inside. My mom lets out the comment, "Well, normally you come home after a date." Just said a lot happened, and I don't want to talk about it. So a date on Tinder turned into me getting kidnapped, held hostage for sex, and with all my medical conditions going to shit at once. I am sorry if anyone in the armed services see this, but it really happened, and well, I couldn't get out if I tried. I told my friends and family where I was. Simply no one helped me or tried to. Oh dear, this happened to me just last week. I am on the Bumble dating app. I accepted a date with a guy on there who coincidentally happened to be a brother of a guy I have known casually for a few years. This mistakenly made me feel he must be safe and normal. I allowed this person to pick me up from my house. Huge mistake. One of the first questions he asked me is, "Are you racist?" I replied, "No, I don't feel I am." "Why?" He replied, he is not racist, but he doesn't like N-ers. At first, I thought I heard wrong. I did not. For the rest of the evening, much of his conversation consisted of using the N-word repeatedly, coupled with questions asking me if I had ever dated a N-er. He said he could never date a woman who had Ked 1. He was also overly hyperactive. I believe he might have been on something like speed or something else. Honestly, I have no idea. He showed me screenshots of pics and comments from my private Instagram. He criticized my photos and said I posted them for attention. He told me he Googled and researched me. He said he did not like the thought of any woman of his receiving comments on her photos by N-ers. He loved using the N-word. I asked how he was able to obtain any photos since my Instagram is private. His answer was because he is ex-military. He proceeded to tell me about men he had killed in Iraq at point-blank range during Operation Freedom. He also announced he wanted me to post only photos of him and I on my social media accounts. He asked what I was doing the next day, and I said I am busy. The following day I received a text from this racist maniac saying he's sitting in his vehicle in my driveway. I texted back I am not home, and I am disturbed to hear he is in my driveway. I explained I didn't want to see him anymore. He replied with several long texts begging me to be with him, telling me I am beautiful and amazing. He said he found and kept 2 strands of my hair. He spoke as if we had been dating for months. When I said I barely know you, please stop, he replied he would. He did not. I received more pleading text messages. Then I received a text asking to just hang out as friends. I said, no. We are 2 very different people, and it's best we don't see each other at all. He then replied with very mean name calling and telling me I am fat. He called me Miss Piggy. LOL, he said 4 people had told him I am a fat bitch. He said he has $750K in the bank, and that was not enough to feed me. He told me to F off. I hope I will never hear from him again. I have saved all the texts from this man in case he ever shows up at my house again. I have them to show to the police. I have blocked him on all my sites, and hopefully he won't see this or anything else connected to me. This one Bumble date was definitely with a scary dude. Asterisk, I want to add that after this very upsetting experience, I deleted my profile on that dating app and have not been on any dating sites since. After my divorce, I tried a couple of dating sites for about 3 months total, and was not pleased with the quality of any of the men I encountered. After all I have been through, I have taken a complete break from socializing, and it has remained this way since January. I had many experiences on dating sites, a few weird situations here and there, the odd catfish, but most of them pretty good. This one is still quite fresh, but it has been by far the worst experience on a dating site, and it has left me sick to my stomach. It's a lot to read, so sit down with a hot cup of tea or whatever preferred beverage. So I matched with this guy, Jay, and we had an awesome conversation right away, great chemistry and all that, and we hit it off pretty quick. He mentioned he had kids, and they would always come first, which is not a problem for me at all. I assumed that he wasn't with the mother of his children anymore, as he was working and living 3 hours away from them. I actually found it admirable that he still made time for his kids every week to see them, even though he had a crazy work schedule. We talked for several weeks through text and phone calls, and he was the sweetest, attentionate, funny. He would send me pictures of him and his kids having fun, and it made my heart melt. My pastime is to paint cute portraits, and he asked me to paint his kids, which I gladly accepted. By then I was pretty keen to meet him, and when the first date came I was super happy and excited. It was the cutest date. We played some board games in the car and ate popcorn next to a lake. Talked until late together in the car. While we were talking, his phone was pinging quite a lot, and at one point he reached to look at the messages. And I didn't mean to glance, but the corner of my eye caught a text message from Princess. The girl in me of course was alarmed, but hey, I thought, we are only on the first date, and we haven't known each other for so long. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt, and don't ask questions otherwise he will think you are crazy. So I shoved that on the back of my head and continued staying in contact with him. He would take news every day and talk about him and what he wanted, explain to me that there was never any love in his marriage, so that's why it was over now. But he was looking for real love, a connection, someone to be with, etc. But he would always put his kids first. He said how the most important thing for him was honesty and communication. I thought how cool that he's got the vulnerability to talk about this to me. I was quite flattered, and my heart melted further. Now comes the second date. He asked me if I'd be keen to come up to his place, and even offered to pay for my gas money. I declined the money, but I thought it was really thoughtful of him, so jumped in my car and did the 3H trip to see him. We spent a lovely time together, and of course we ended up having sex. He seemed quite nervous, and I won't go into details, but there was some malfunction in the system. Honestly, I didn't care. I thought it was quite sweet actually, and guess what? Yes, my heart melted again. I just wanted to give all my TLC to this sweet, loving guy that goes through a hard work schedule to provide for his children. He went out of his way to come and see me at my place, when he had already a couple hours drive from his kid's place, and 3 hours left to drive to get home. It made me feel really special and appreciated. We continued to stay in contact, but what I shoved at the back of my head came back. This guy is too good to be true. My gut feeling was telling me that the whole thing smelled fishy and weird. I couldn't forget the princess text, and he actually never mentioned divorce. He would just call the mother of his children the ex. Still went back to see him. We went for a walk, and he told me about his upcoming trip to Brazil in a month and a half. And I know that it was so good for him to get some time for himself for once. We went to the post office to renew his passport and all that stuff. He opened up about his situation, how he was actually currently in the process of divorcing his wife. I thought that it was very strange he didn't mention that before, but thought that hey, fair enough, it's a quite difficult subject to talk about. When we were back in the car, I had his phone in my hands to choose some music, and bing, comes a message from a lovely looking girl from Instagram. Hey babe, I hope you had a good rest. That wasn't his ex-wife. My heart just skipped a beat, and I went cold. He noticed, and asked what was wrong, what he did wrong. I couldn't get a word out of my mouth. Now guys, you are probably going to tell me, hey, he never promised you anything, which is true, but I can't help it, I'm a girl. It is imprinted in my genes, I guess, but I just want to be loved and cherished. So when we came home, I was quite emotional, and I told him that okay, he didn't promise anything, and it hasn't been so long we've been dating. But if his thing is to have several girls in his life, great for him. I'm not there to judge, but it's not my thing and I don't want to be a part of it. I told him that this message reminded me of a very bad memory from when I found out my first love cheated on me. He looked at me, and he was very understanding. He told me that he wanted to fix this. He would delete the girls that were talking to him. I told him it wasn't my point. If he is involved with those girls, I can't stop him from doing so, but I can stop myself from seeing him. He looked at me in the eyes and told me how he was someone that wanted just one person in his life, and that he was sitting next to her right now. I wanted to believe him, so I did. He sounded so genuine. Later on in the evening, I still saw a message on the corner of my eye to Princess about a renewal of something, but my stupid ass just ignored it and thought he was probably calling his daughter like this or something. If you are still reading me, we are now close to the end of the story. I was trusting and happy to go see him again a couple of weeks later. So I did, and when I came over he wasn't there, but he had left the door open for me. He was still working at some friends, so he wouldn't be back for about 3 hours. I made myself comfortable, went to take something in the fridge, and then I saw on his calendar, only a month and a half until I can see C. Right away all the dots connected. We girls are pretty nifty at finding out who is who, and it was fairly easy to find out that C lives in Brazil, and is the one that sent the, hey babe, I hope you had a good rest message. I'm also pretty sure that she was the princess contact on his phone. They were talking about the passport renewal. Funny enough, she looks like a more beautiful version of myself. I was extremely disappointed, so sent him a message to tell him I saw the calendar and connected all the dots, and that I understood he was going to see someone important to him in Brazil. But I was sorry, I couldn't go further in this, as I've been quite clear that it's not my thing to share. I was packing my stuff back and searching for a hotel room when he answered back. He told me I was right, and he was sorry, he had been selfish, but we could remain friends if I wanted. Then something about how I deserved better and whatnot. I didn't answer back. I thought, how can I be friends with someone that lied with such ease? And if he lied about this, maybe he is lying about the divorce? I don't want to be friends. I went up in the room to gather the rest of my stuff and noticed the envelope that I used to give him the painting I did for him. Inside was the painting, along with a picture of him and his wife. I took the painting and thought that I didn't want my art to be part of this guy's life. I had just broken up with someone who wanted only a warm body to ease her rebound from breaking up with her ex, while I wanted more of a committed relationship. So suffice it to say I was a bit lonely and looking for someone more on the same page. I reactivated my OkCupid profile and resumed the search. She messaged me, which is a bit out of the ordinary, but hardly a red flag to me. I was of course thrilled. Her profile indicated she spoke a ton of languages, was in a PhD program, and liked motorcycles. She overall seemed like someone brilliant and eccentric. She was also quite attractive and lived very close by. Her first message to me: "Why are you so gosh darn beautiful?" So we chat for a while. Dude, she was smart as hell, and I was very interested, and phone numbers get exchanged. One cold evening in December, I hunkered down to write a final project due in 18 hours. I pop an Adderall and get to work. On one of my breaks, she gives me a call, and we chat, and all of a sudden, she starts questioning me about every tiny detail on my profile in a very accusatory tone. Of course, since I was under the influence of a medical-grade stimulant and am an anxious individual at even the best of times, my anxiety spiked, and I had to stop the conversation, apologizing profusely. I was not in the best mental state at the time, of course. Maybe I overreacted. But her response? For the next week, she would call me nonstop. My phone would not stop vibrating. She literally kept dialing and redialing, as though she were hovering over the phone and waiting for the call to hang up so she could redial again. I had to shut my phone off, because every time I blocked her number, it would work for about half a day before she started calling me from a different number. Her last message to me: "Answer and speak, or I'll kill you." Yes, she threatened me, and ended it with a hard emoticon. The universe could have undergone heat death and collapsed back into a primordial singularity, and I would not have been able to go nope 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 enough times to express my feelings about the whole situation. Fortunately, the next time I tried OkCupid, I found a wonderful, loving, and most importantly non-crazy person with whom we enjoyed a few months of joy and growth before we had to break up because of life circumstances. My worst experience was going out with a guy who I was attracted to on OKC, but we hardly messaged beforehand. He wanted to save that for the first date, which I understood. His name, I can't recall it. I think it was Aiden or something in the A range. On our date together, he was instantly a very shy and awkward person. That's okay, I thought. I can handle that. We both went to the mall together since I needed to grab bleach and color for my hair, and there was a great place that gave me discounts because I shopped there frequently. I told him I was considering going green or pink, and he told me that I'd look terrible and I should do blue. Yes, this man I just met had tried controlling my hair color, and when I say this, I purchased the colors I wanted, and he said, "I can't be seen with you looking like a clown." Okay, I figured his sense of humor was just offbeat. He seemed like he was kidding, so I thought. Once I got all of my stuff, he asked if I was hungry, and we both went and got a meal together. This was when all my bunches kicked into overdrive. My gut was telling me to run out. In our conversation, he is pulling up my dating profile on his phone and reading it, and then asking me questions based off of it. He asks me my political views. I politely decline and say I don't like talking heavy on a first meeting. I like Trump. I bet you enjoy Bernie, huh? This was the election period, and then he gave me a speech about how Bernie Sanders would ruin this and that, and it was entirely uncomfortable. Did he care? Not a bit. I accidentally ate meat product that time, before I was vegetarian, and it was during Lent. I told him, oh no, I wasn't supposed to eat meat today, it's Friday, and he said religion was stupid and only idiots believe in religion. I told him that I didn't appreciate him saying that, and then this begins the argument. So if you're Catholic, how are you bisexual? Because I like men and women. So you've been with both? Yes. Like truly? Yes. So you aren't a virgin? Why are you? I've never had a girlfriend. I can see why. Okay, that's not a bad thing, we're young. 18, 19 at this point. How many people have you had sex with? I don't want to answer this question. It's making me uncomfortable. Tell me. No. I don't mind lesbians, but I hate gay men. Okay, I've had it at this point. Why? I don't have anything against you. Men are just wrong. I have friends who are gay, and I can't sit here and listen to you talk like this and continue our date on these terms. It was a bit of back and forth, and I left soon after. He tried following me in the parking lot, and I wouldn't allow him to drive me home. He texted me that evening saying he had a great time, and I ignored his messages that followed days after before blocking him. This is a snippet of our conversation. He also insulted women who sleep around, people who date under 18, and an array of insults saying I wore too much makeup and that he isn't a guy who only wants sex. I'm not like other guys. Yeah, you're worse. This guy was a total jerk, and he would find many ways to make me feel bad, and he'd get a rise out of it. He knew more about me than I did about him, and this was a big mistake. It was probably one of the worst mistakes I've made, sitting there when I knew I should have walked out sooner. Luckily, he didn't live too nearby where I lived in Utah, so he wasn't able to run into me again unless he tried. I had menial conversation with someone on a dating app who kept trying to meet with me. He was 2 hours away, so the timing was never right, and as such was not really a big deal to me. That would end up being a good thing. I sat in the restaurant with my friend, as my flight was getting ready to leave in a few hours. I was finally getting ready to try the local pizza and pub joint that everyone, including that guy, recommended. As we sat there waiting for our food, I felt someone's gaze on me. It was an intense stare that I could feel and see out of my peripheral vision. I didn't understand it, as he was there with his wife and daughter. He was being so obvious in his staring that it was a tad disturbing. When they finally finished their meal and was leaving the booth, he stared hard at me once again, as if he was almost willing me to notice him. I asked my friend if she noticed him staring. She said it was odd. My text notification dinged and the guy said, "I see you finally made it to get pizza." I asked, "Were you here? Why didn't you come say hi?" He replied, "I was leaving and didn't want to interrupt. You're even prettier than your picture. That doesn't usually happen." I replied, "Thanks." I told my friend about the text. She sat wide-eyed looking at me. I bet that was the guy in the booth next to us. That is why he was willing you to make eye contact with him. What an ass. He was on a dating app with a wife and kid. He did not look like his picture, which is why I didn't recognize him, as he had noticed me. He found me on Instagram and messaged me on there, thinking he got away with not being found out. He still kept trying to flirt and schedule a meeting. I ignored every message. That is one of the many reasons why dating online can be discouraging. I believe I was catfished by a creepy businessman. I spent some time casually on Tinder for a while. I met some nice people, shockingly. Went on hikes, out for coffee, dinner, music festivals, and never slept with any of them. Crazy, right? There are cool people online who don't just want to screw other people. Anyhow, there was this one guy who desperately wanted to meet up at a bar sometime. First red flag was that he was insanely good looking and wore expensive designer clothes. And while I think I'm reasonably attractive, he was still much too pretty. It struck me as odd that he was looking for a hookup, but yet was totally fine to meet up for a drink and just chat. All his photos were selfies, not modeling shots, and they all seemed consistent with being taken around the same time, so I figured meh. Why not? He asked to meet up at around 4:30 p.m., which was extremely early to be meeting at a bar. Oddly, I found this comforting as it would be daylight and the bar would be empty. I arrived on time, it was raining, and I entered the bar to see 2 tables occupied and a friendly bartender asking me what I wanted. Immediately I felt eyes on me, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I casually looked over my shoulder. At one of the occupied tables sat 4 overweight businessmen, and one of them was staring intently at me. Weird. But whatever. My phone bings. "Hey, 15 minutes away, sorry traffic." I reply, "No problem, just waiting inside." I connected to the available Wi-Fi and sat down. Immediately his status updated. "Jack is less than 1 kilometer away." Huh, that's weird. Probably just a Tinder glitch. I can't imagine the location is super accurate. If he's 15 minutes away, he's definitely still on the highway. 15 minutes went by, then 20, no reply from him. I got up to look outside, and when came back and I saw the same businessman approaching me with his phone in hand. "Hey, you look like you are waiting for someone. Can I buy you a drink while you wait? My friends would be happy for you to join us." Reading this, it probably doesn't sound all that creepy. It's possible he could be asking because I'm there alone and clearly bored. It still gave me an uncomfortable feeling. His friends looked over and gave me a thumbs up. The guy was in his late 50s and I was 24. He also reeked of stale cigarette smoke and stood far too close to me. It was uncomfortable, but not quite enough to cause suspicion. I was about to say no, but thank you. But what he said next was really what set my radar off. "Come join us, we'll look after you." Young guys can never show up on time, can they? Always gotta rely on the older men. I froze. How did he know I was meeting a guy? And not a female friend? Or a group? My heart started racing, but I smiled and said, "Actually, my ID is still in the car, I'll go grab it." He said he'd order me a drink, and I left, and immediately hopped in my car and waited, watching the bar door. A little less than 3 minutes went past, and the guy came out and looked around. 2 minutes later they all came out, got in his 2001 Mercedes and left. I still had Wi-Fi, and I refreshed Tinder. Jack is less than 5 kilometers away. Jack is 15 kilometers away. Jack is 22 kilometers away. It's now 1 hour since Jack last messaged me. My phone buzzes. I've just arrived, and am sitting at a table now. Have I been stood up? Winky face. I was still sitting outside the bar in my car. No one had gone inside, and no one had come out. I reply, I'm still here actually. Where are you? And that was the last I heard from Jack. I don't know for certain whether those guys were luring young women into their group for drinks, but my intuition told me something was off with them. Not good. I gave online dating several chances spanning years, and the only changes I saw was it just got worse. Keep in mind, I was a male looking for females. And also keep in mind, I never had an issue meeting women until I went online. To be fair, I tried most platforms at various times, some more than once. The platforms ranged, but weren't really the problem generally. The lower you get, the worse they were. I did everything I was supposed to do, and I wasn't typical on there. My bios were probably in the top 90%. See my account here, I have no issues writing. My pictures were recent, I was always honest, and I was never a serial liker, that apparently most men are on these things. I was selective, but open and reasonable. Not to sound arrogant, but I know more than half the women who never responded to me would have probably liked me had they given me a chance. But as a guy on these things, I'm just one of hundreds of profiles that liked or messaged a female at any given time, so I don't exactly blame any of them at the same time. While women have that advantage, it isn't all that it's cracked up to be. And in all fairness, a large percentage of men give the good ones a bad name. Both sides have issues. Communication, or lack of it, was another issue all around, and is sadly a dying art. But it is what it is. I've written about that enough times on here. The only good that came from it, believe it or not, was sharpening up my knowledge of scammers/ghosters/catfish, write up about the various platforms, and to be able to write about some of the experiences/platforms on here. I guess you can say any experience, good or bad, is an experience. In some cases, I've helped some people out in different ways, though it's mostly to identify scammers. I did entertain myself sometimes with some of the scammers, so there was some cheap entertainment right there. I was going to write a massive article about all the platforms, but deemed it to be a waste of time since things are always changing. Another decent thing was going on some dates. Not that most of the dates amounted to anything, but being an online reviewer, I was able to review a lot more places, mainly restaurants, than I probably otherwise normally would have. I know some people personally that have met their person through online dating. The issue was that was 10, 15 plus years ago. I know of no one personally that has had any real success with online dating in recent years. I do think at one point it was a viable option, but it changed for the worst as time went on, and by the time I got to it, it was probably largely a shell of what it used to be. So to sum up my experience, it was one of the most demoralizing and demeaning things I've ever done, and in the end, it was a large waste of time. I will never do online dating again. It's horrid. I had just gotten out of my first marriage, a 20-plus year marriage that was actually over long before it officially ended. In fact, it was the Saturday after I had received notice on Friday that my divorce was final. I made the decision to sign up for an online dating site. Since I was 55 at the time, I chose the site ourtime.com. I actually went out and bought a camera to connect to my computer to get a few pictures for the site. I think I spent almost an hour trying to get a good picture. Finally, I got one that I thought was okay, and created my first ever online dating profile. The first few days I got a few responses. At the time, I was living in a small, rural community, so there were just not that many people close by. But I found one person who seemed nice. She lived in Irving, a suburb of Dallas, and a little over an hour drive from me. We exchanged a few messages online. Actually, I was really inexperienced at dating and knew nothing at all about proper online dating etiquette. So, when Gina sent me a message, I would wait a day or two before responding. I did not want her to think I was a creepy stalker. As a result of my ignorance, it took almost 3 weeks of back and forth, or rather wait, and forth, before we scheduled our first date. But we met for dinner on a Sunday night and hit it off really well. I thought Gina was one of the most beautiful women I had ever met. She was intelligent, witty, fun, and interesting. I wanted to see her again, and really soon. One of the problems, though, was our work schedules. I was in the midst of a really intricate and busy project with a client in the Eastern Time Zone, which meant I needed to be at my desk and ready to work by 6:30 my time, Monday through Friday. Gina's office did not open until after 9 o'clock, and her work days were Wednesday through Sunday. When we planned our second date, we planned it for a Monday night. When that Monday arrived, I was completely swamped at work and knew that Tuesday was going to be even worse. I got a message from Gina questioning my sincerity and expressing reservations about our date. For strictly work reasons, I also had reservations about our date. I took the opportunity and canceled. Now, my plan was to wait 2 weeks. I have no idea why I choose that time frame, and try to reconnect. I really liked Gina and really wanted to see her again. So, I am home alone on Friday night. I am thinking about Gina, how much I would like to call her, how I hoped we could have a second date and see if the sparks were still there. But, in my mind, I have to wait at least a few more days. Then my cell phone rings. It is Gina. We talk. I explain how busy I have been with work and how I really would like to see her again. We make plans for a second date, this time on a Saturday night. Before long, I am spending most of my time with Gina. In a few months, we rent an apartment together, and we have been together ever since. On February 27th, 2013, Gina and I married. So my most unforgettable online dating experience was my first and only online dating experience. Gina and I are still married and more in love than ever. From a young age, my biggest life goal was to get rich. My second biggest life goal was to find someone perfect and get married. I attacked each goal with zeal. However, goal 1 interfered with goal 2. When you're on the road all the time seeking wealth, you don't have the time to do anything but make meaningless, short-term sexual liaisons or fleeting romances with no holding power. I did get rich for a while, but at a great cost. I even met the perfect woman I should have married. But I didn't marry her, and that's a regret. But the desire to find that perfect woman became the great white whale of my life, and I pursued every possible avenue to the point of near mental illness. In one 18-month period, I dated almost 100 different women. I would ask out women in grocery stores, at parties, friends of friends. I didn't care. At that point, there was an emotional hunger that couldn't seem to be filled. I would date and discard, date and discard. I joined every sporting gig imaginable, from co-ed volleyball to biking to running to hiking. I went to concerts and charity balls and did the museum tours, watched opera in a tuxedo or ballet. I went to musicals and Shakespeare on the lawn, everywhere that women might hang out. I bumped into them on purpose and spilled their drinks, so I had to buy them another, an excuse to talk. To that end, I joined every matchmaking service you can think of, from lunch dates to Yahoo Personals, Matchmaker, Match, OKC, POF, over a dozen of them. Most of them are long out of business now. I even ran a dating organization for 5 years, a progressive dinner thing for people over 40. The only thing I didn't do was meet women in bars. I don't drink, and picking up women in bars takes a certain kind of game I just don't have. I had various goals. I could meet someone, or just have an interesting experience, or make a friend, or get laid, or actually meet the love of my life. After dating hundreds, perhaps thousands of women, I decided there were 4 possible outcomes. You like her, but she doesn't like you 60% of the time. She likes you, but you don't like her 30% of the time. You both don't like each other 9% of the time. Or the Holy Grail, you both like each other 1% of the time. So I decided that to meet that one person in a 100, I would have to date 100 women minimum. I've had every possible experience you can think of, from women humiliating me over my looks to women fucking me in a public bathroom on a first date. I've seen so much. I could write books on it. I've been catfished. I've been stalked. I've been heartbroken. I've been conned by gold diggers. I've been trolled by religious nutbags. I've been sought by the desperate. I've been lied to. I have had many, many experiences. A couple of memorable experiences include heartbreak. Once I met a woman from some personal service at a nice, candlelit restaurant. I don't know how we ended up there, since I usually like to go low-key on a first date in case it goes south fast. But this woman, when she walked in, was beautiful. Petite, wearing a clean, pressed dress, with blonde hair and blue eyes. She was the personification of innocence and beauty. By chance, we got a corner table next to brick wall and a window. It was pouring outside and we were cozy. The wall blocked off the restaurant noise. We could have been the only people there. Our eyes locked, we chatted and laughed. We told stories, we held hands. Hours passed. They seemed like seconds. When the time finally ended, there were tears in her eyes. "I never thought anything like this could happen," she said, looking into my eyes. I was holding both her hands in mine. "I think you're a really good man," she said softly. We walked out in the rain to her car. She hugged me in the rain, with her head on my chest. "I really want to see you again," she said. On any other blind date, I would have invited myself into her car and tried to make out. Not now. It would have ruined the moment. She handed me her business card from work with her phone and email on it. She wrote her phone number on the back. I put it in my pocket and watched her drive away. I thought, this is it. This is the one. My work has paid off. Rarely had I felt that way about a date. I went home and watched the clock until the next day, when I could call her. I wasn't playing the 3-day rule, where a man waits 3 days to call. She was the one. I didn't need to play games. I wanted it to be real. You can't say the wrong thing to the right person. So the next day I called her. The number didn't work. I emailed her. It bounced back. I called her on the office phone. She no longer worked there. It was a fraud. At the end of it all, it was some kind of fraud. I can't figure out how or why it was a fraud. I couldn't figure out what the con was, or the gag, or even the motive. Was it just for a free meal and drink? Was it just to hone acting skills? It all seemed so real. How could it have all been so fake? How could I have been so conned, so gullible? It was confusing and very disheartening. Of course, I never heard from her again. I attempted to track her down with no luck on the off chance that there was some mistake, that she was still looking for me. But she wasn't looking for me. It was some kind of gag for her. That was pretty bad. I've also had bad blind dates, one I have discussed on Quora a few times, where the women looked me up and down, threw $20 on the table and said, with utter contempt, "This sure as hell isn't happening," and walked out. That was painful and humiliating. Even the waitress pitied me. Having the waitress see it was even more humiliating. I once met a woman through a personals on Craigslist who was 20 years younger than I was. I have written about this on Quora also. She stalked me for years. Even after telling her to go away, she emailed me multiple times a day, saying her piskik told her we would always be together. Once, I came home from work and found a pair of wedding bands in my mailbox. I had never told her where I lived. It took over 5 years to get rid of her. The scariest part is that she's a Harvard-trained medical doctor. I met a woman at Cafe Vittoria who was filling out a survey as we talked. After 30 minutes of drilling me with questions, she stood up and said, "You failed," and walked out. She left me with the bill. I met a woman I talked with for weeks online who told me she loved the same things as I did: biking, running, hiking, adventure. When I met her at the bar of her choice, it turned out to be the scariest, most disgusting dive in a bad part of town. And she weighed well over 300 pounds. She was a liar. I excused myself to the bathroom and escaped through a kitchen exit. I was aided by a stranger who saw the whole thing and told me to run. Another time I was standing in the door of Cafe Vittoria, waiting for my date as crowds of people strolled back and forth. I picked her out of the crowd, and even as she walked towards me I said, "She wants to fuck." And within an hour we were rolling around in the back seat of my car. I don't know how I knew just from looking at her walking towards me, but I did. It was easy. I was amazed. Once I went on a hike with blind date up in the Blue Hills. I've also written about this on Quora. Halfway up I got the runs. I had to dash off deep into the woods to relieve myself and use my underwear as TP. Shaking in the legs, I returned to her. She was beautiful but looked annoyed. I was away a long time. I probably no longer smelled spring fresh. In any case, she was long gone after that, never to return. On a trip to the same place, I hiked up Blue Hills to the fire tower on top, where this girl, whom I had never met, dropped her jeans in the top and ordered me to do it from behind while she looked at the scenery. Hikers milled around the bottom of the tower and could have come up any time. She liked the risk. We did this a couple of other times, but she disappeared. Once on Quora, a man wrote a story of a fellow who spent his whole life seeking the perfect woman. On his deathbed, he was asked why he never found her. "Ah," he said, smiling feebly, "but I did find her. She wouldn't have me. She was looking for the perfect man." So much wisdom in that short story. There is no perfect. When it comes to dating, the best is the enemy of the good. If you're always looking for greener grass, you'll never find it. You have to know when what you have is good enough for you. It's not settling. It's knowing that there are no perfect people or situations, and that everyone is unique and has a story. You can learn something good and even important from everyone you meet, even the 300-pound woman in a dive bar in Quincy. We're all people. We all deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. We all deserve honesty, even if that honesty is painful, rather than cowardly ghosting or abandonment. Everyone has an ego. Everyone can be hurt. It's easy to get a date. It's hard to make the date stick. The adage of the movie, Next Stop Wonderland, is true. The magic isn't in what gets you together. The magic is in what keeps you together. Perhaps there's still hope for an aging bachelor then. After I got divorced, I decided to try Tinder. I actually have 2 bad experiences. Nothing fatal or creepy, and no existential threats. It just sucked and convinced me to try the old-fashioned approach. Say hi to a girl and ask for her number. Free dinner. For so many reasons, I think that honesty is always the right thing. So when I met a seemingly nice girl and asked her out, I was just myself. She asked me about my work. I'm a lawyer. She asked me what kind of lawyer. I told her. And then she started asking me, "Isn't it expensive to live in Japan?" Of course, I didn't see where she was going with that, so I honestly said, "It pays well enough that I don't have to worry much." She ordered an expensive dinner, several drinks, and dessert, and I asked for the check. She stood up and said, "You don't mind getting this, right? You make a lot of money, don't you?" And she walked out. Using Tinder to find clients. It's not what you think. After the expensive dinner, I decided to go for coffee on the next date. I met a girl for coffee, and she gave me her card. She was in real estate. One thing about dating in Japan is that some girls like newbies. They don't want a guy who has dated a lot of Japanese girls. They want to be your first Japanese girlfriend. So I thought it was a good thing when she asked me how long I'd been in Japan. Just a few weeks at that time. She seemed very interested about my work, what brought me to Japan, and how long I planned to stay. I was looking for a relationship, so these questions sounded like she was deciding whether or not to date me. We decided to meet for coffee. Coffee went well. She asked me more about my work and what part of town I worked in. These are important things because if you date someone, you don't want to be too far away. That can be difficult on a relationship. We decided to meet again a few days later. When she sat down, she put a folder on the table. "Okay, when do you want to start looking at apartments? I found several that meet your requirements." She wasn't interested in dating me at all. Every question she asked was geared toward finding my housing requirements. I've seen a lot, but I didn't expect that on Tinder. I've talked to several other foreigners in Japan, and they all have similar experiences. I think another common one is girls who flirt to get free English lessons. They pretend to be interested and go out a few times, but when he moves in, she says she has a boyfriend, and she just wants to be friends. I think someone forgot to tell Japanese girls that Tinder is a dating app. All these 26 years of my life, I have never been in a relationship, never dated any girl. I am, completely immersed in my study, research, career goals, etc. In addition, my shy and introvert nature have been a major bottleneck to start the conversation with any girl. Many times an intense wave of loneliness kicks in, and I used to listen to sad songs, write some poems to soothe my restless mind. Anyhow, after giving so many thoughts, I decided to open my Tinder account. I read numerous articles, watched various videos on how to Tinder. I am an average-looking guy, so was really not expecting to get likes from so-called beautiful Tinder queens. I put some info about my education, my research, hobbies, favorite music, movies in the bio. I was ready to explore the adventures of Tinder. After 1 week, I got a notification that someone's liked my profile. But, in order to see who liked your profile, you need Tinder Gold, which costs $14.99 per month. I was really hesitant to purchase this, but finally decided to dedicate that money, which I thought would be beneficial to gain any relationship, friendship experience with the girls. I got Tinder Gold. Match 1. Some semi-nude Chinese girl had liked my profile. Needless to say, it was a fake profile. Still, I matched that profile just to see what is next. Hello there. She, what is your number? So my guess was correct. Pretending not to know what his number. I am a student in XYZ University. What about you? She, what is your mobile number? I think we should get to know each other a little bit, and then we can exchange the numbers. No reply for 2 days. I unmatched her. Match 2. One black American girl / student. Yes, I am also studying in the USA. With 2 cigarettes in her mouth and the beer bottle in hand. Again, I was really not interested, but I really wanted to utilize my $14.99 on this Tinder Gold plan. Hello, good morning. She, good afternoon. I, what you do study at XYZ University. She mentioned student in her bio. She, good evening. LOL asterisk good night. Yes, it was around 11 p.m. Immediately unmatched her. I was getting frustrated as I got similar two other useless matches. One from a shirtless guy. And I was not getting matches to whom I sent the like/super like. Here are some of the bios of such Tinder queens. But me a cheesecake or forget me. I am a slut for ranch. Gonna swipe right who's way out of my league. Make me laugh, and MURS. And much more stupid, cringeworthy things. This continued for 18 to 20 days. I canceled the Tinder Gold subscription. Disabled my profile from Tinder and finally, uninstalled it. I was back to my normal and lonely life. I was wondering even after having good profile pictures, interesting bio. As I already mentioned that as a PhD student I researched really well in these aspects. On the account, what went wrong? Why I couldn't get a single decent match? I started introspecting about that. My main intention to utilize the Tinder was to just gain some little bit of experience about dating, talking confidently to other girls, how to have a meaningful conversation, etc. It was a useless attempt. I wasted my $15. Actually, I did not. I got a good experience about how Tinder works by exploiting the single souls from that money. Now, I decided not to think about that experience and concentrate on my work, hobbies. I would not call the experience terrible, but it was a bad experience. I joined Tinder for having some good conversations and developing good bonds. Chatted with a guy who was intelligent, funny, and well-educated. I always preferred such kinds. Negatives were, he was too secretive about his life and very rigid. So we started chatting, moved to WhatsApp, and after knowing enough about each other we decided to meet. The first meeting was good. I enjoyed his company. We met at a coffee shop, and he was more or less nice to me. He also cracked some jokes which I enjoyed. He used to tease me a lot, and I had not much problem with it, but it also led to fighting among us on a regular basis. Another problem, which was there that he would not answer my questions. We used to talk on daily basis, and I remember asking his date of birth for 1 month, but he did not tell me. I still do not know why he hid that info from me, because that was not a big deal. Second incident happened when I was in his car and just saw his contact cards. I casually picked one of them. At that time, his reaction was, "Why are you looking at my card?" I did not take it seriously, and like another joke and petty fight, I reacted by giving the card back without seeing it and said, "I have least interest in it." He was hiding his address and contact info from me, which otherwise would be available to many of his clients. He is an advocate. After a few weeks, I kept asking for his date of birth. 'Cause I was surprised why would he hide a simple fact, or maybe he was teasing me by making me more curious. After a few weeks, when we met, again I was in his car and his cards were there. I picked one of them, and this time I was very happy and decided to keep it with me. I had never imagined that he was so egoistic and stubborn that he forced me to return the card, even tried to snatch it from me. Initially, I thought it's just a momentary thing. I even asked him, "Can't you see me happy?" 'Cause there was actually nothing to hide. It was just his stubborn nature and ego. He told me that he won't get out of the car. We were heading to a restaurant. If I did not return the card. After arguments I decided to go back, but he had locked the car too and asked me, "Ace hi chali jaogi, you will leave without returning the card?" I was surprised at this. Then he snatched my purse. I was too angry and hurt at that locking of car and his rigid behavior. I returned the card back to him and got out of his car and without looking back, moved towards the metro station to come back home. It was our last meeting. It ended there. I had been ignoring the things for a few months. 'Cause for me he was important. But then there was a moment when my mind told me, no, that's enough. I can't take it anymore. Cannot hurt myself more. Note, I am happy that I could get it out of my system by sharing it here. I do not have hard feelings for him, but I am hurt. I still feel bad when I think about it. Date 1. Met a nice man for drinks after chatting with him for a couple of weeks. Did not feel a connection. Got a little drunk, he dropped me home, he tried to kiss me, but I was not interested at all. Date 2. Met someone with a load of mutual friends. Again, met for a date, no sparks, went home alone. Now, I was getting bolder and choosing guys to talk only after looking at their profiles. Date 3. Met someone with similar background, met him for a drink. He mentioned he was in a long-term but long-distance relationship with a girl, but was very unhappy. Felt bad for him, continued chatting with him. Next time we met, we had sex. Did I feel guilty? Sure. But I was lonely as fuck, and we continued doing this for 2 weeks. Both realized it was wrong and stopped it forever. Now he is married to the girl, and I do not think she knows. After a couple months, started Tinder again. Date 4, matched with a guy who wanted to hook up only. I was okay with it. Went back, had awfully bad sex, though did not complain, but man, oh man, I think my face gave it away. He blocked me the next day. Huh. Meanwhile, date 1 and date 4 turned out to be best friends, and date 1 started abusing me, which was very stressful and degrading. Date 5. Now this was a guy, we had the exact same background, same tastes, same challenges. I was very cautious. I spoke to him for almost 2 months before meeting him, but when we met, sparks flew, at least for me. We went back to my place and had a very great time, but he left immediately later, saying he had work the next day, was a weekend. The next day he blocked me. This was when all hell broke loose. I felt pathetic, hurt, and so stupid. Well, I did drop him a message, sharing the same. Have always regretted being so emotional. After that, I was off Tinder for a very long time. Went back again. Date 6, met a guy, he was okay. Wanted a friends with benefits relationship. I was okay with it, since I was lonely but the sex was really bad. Guys, a girl needs some loving too. This continued for 2 months. Date 7, at last met a guy, I had been interacting for a while, and the experience was fucking explosive. He never blocked me, met him once again. Sometimes we connect over chat, but no one bothers the other one. Date 8, met another guy, fell in love, was in a relationship for almost a year. But after 10 months or so the relationship fizzled out. Tried for a year, but well, things did not work. While the relationship had its ups and downs, it was stable and happy one for most of the time. Meanwhile, date 5 connected again, apologizing. I was not interested, but when things got tougher with the guy I was dating, I connected and vented out my frustration. After my breakup, hooked up with date 5 again. For all the good sex, he never allowed any emotional connection. Went on and off for a year too. Both traveled abroad / domestically at our own expense to see each other sometime, but always ended up being frustrated because of other priorities. More often than not it was me traveling and getting ditched. Realized this was not helping me, and after a lot of heartache, on my part of course, decided to move on. Of course, not before, I had another one of those emotional outbursts. Regrettably this lasted a week. This time, however, I was not blocked, felt pretty pathetic. The last one has definitely opened a Pandora's box of emotions for me, forcing me to reevaluate what the hell I want from Tinder in life. Net, Tinder was a mixed bag for me. Have spoken to interesting people, creeps, fuckboys, all kinds of guys. You just need to make sure both parties involved are looking for the same thing. For me, the number of bad experiences exceeded the good ones. My most unpleasant with Tinder experience was with a guy, and I'll exclude his name for privacy reasons. I was on Tinder in 2016 of October. Nothing in my life was going right, so what could Tinder do to ruin it or make it worse? Having an easy interaction, and maybe sex is cool, nothing else got me out of the house except work. And at the time I was smoking like a chimney, and very socially isolated. I loved my co-workers, and also disliked some. Days when I needed the good, I got the bad. Days when I couldn't handle talking to people, I got the good. My social life was limited, and it was okay to some extent. I liked Tinder on my lunch breaks because it was like talking to someone who would care to listen. Don't go grabbing tissues already. I enjoyed making small talk. Customers would rush me to make their coffee, and I get that. But I liked making connections with others. In this age, it's more difficult to make a human connection unless preceded by an internet one, it seems. So making and keeping friends is difficult. On Tinder, I could ask a stranger how he was or she was. We can talk about where I work and how I got a burrito for lunch. What kind of music we like. In relationships and friendships, there's a certain point where you stop asking each other. You feel like you know everything, or enough to keep having sex and eating pizza while not having a conversation. I like how Tinder gave me the high of what I loved about relationships, sharing and receiving information, without the commitment. Yes, I had commitment issues, but I wasn't outspoken about it. My lack of commitment and my childhood abandonment were two odds I didn't want to interfere, but evidently did at the worst times. I chatted up a guy, and he was good looking, or more so, average kind of good. We made plans to meet up, and I remember Ubering to his place, and we made nice small talk. We watched a movie I never got to see the ending of. To this day, I don't want to because of how it went after. He gave me ice cream, my favorite one, and I thought that was so dreamy. I wasn't catchy feelings, but I was more interested than not. We talked and he kept complimenting my body and etc. etc. I've received compliments on my body before by men, and to this day, I don't know how to react to it. It's a shame when a body can be sexy, but the brain with it was so socially awkward you can't accept the compliment. Welcome to my life. Now back to the story. This guy and I end up parting ways the same. We should do this again sometime. Him meaning the sex, me meaning the hanging out. We kissed each other before I left. It was cool. The day after, I message him hey, and I'm pretty lighthearted. I forgot my favorite water bottle at his house. Yep, that's cliche, right? But this wasn't on purpose. I mentioned it to him and asked him to put it aside for me, and I'd be able to get it later in the week since I worked. His response? Yeah, you left your water bottle along with your dignity at the door. What the actual hell? This decent guy turned into a decent asshole. I didn't know how to react. Do I laugh it off? Is he kidding? I mean, we joked playfully before. He seemed nice. It wasn't worth the shame in this TV asshole personality. Unmatched. I met this guy on a dating site a few years ago. I was 19 at the time, and he claimed to be 23. He seemed really decent, great sense of humor, common sense, charming. We arranged to go on a date on a Saturday night in the city. First warning sign, I showed up in high heels and a bodycon bandage dress with my hair and makeup done, and he thought showing up to a date in dirty jeans and an old scabby sweater, in mustard color and covered in holes, was acceptable. In hindsight, I should have just walked away before he spotted me, but at the time I decided to give him a chance, thinking that some people just aren't fashion conscious, and he might not have had the means to get his clothes looking nice. Second warning sign, as we're walking through the city to the restaurant, he tells me he has a confession to make. Turns out, he's not 23, he's 33. I should have spotted that he didn't look 23 in person, but I guess I was kind of shocked that he turned up looking like a tramp that I just didn't notice. Once again, I should have left. In the restaurant, I'm trying to make conversation whilst we're waiting for our food. If I didn't make conversation, he wouldn't have spoken much. Instead, he was quite content to stare at me. Just staring. The few times he does speak, it's to tell me how attractive I am, and that he likes my dress, but it would look a lot better on his bedroom floor. Third warning sign. He barely eats anything of his meal. He tells me he's not hungry, as he ate a Burger King meal on the bus ride over. This is despite the fact that we'd arranged to eat before going for drinks. Fine, I tell him, but I'm still eating my food. At the end of dinner, he insists on paying. I'm not comfortable with that. I'd much rather pay for my own food and he pays for his, but when he practically shouted at me to stop arguing and let him pay, I just sat back and let him. The part of town with the good pubs and bars is a 10-minute walk, across a bridge and through the old market square. I thought that walk was never going to end. Now, I'm from Norway, but I was studying in the UK at the time, and this city was a really old medieval city with twisting paths, little narrow streets, dark alleys, rickety old buildings, and lots of shady nooks everywhere. So you can imagine how uncomfortable I was walking with him, especially since the journey waxed mostly void of other people. This guy starts getting grabby. He keeps putting his hands on me despite that I've told him to stop. He's getting way too handsy, and he's practically trying to dry hump me. I keep telling him to stop, but at the same time, I don't want to upset him since we're alone, and he's much bigger than me. Then he grabs at the front of my dress, which was strapless, and yanks it down. I was braless, so he completely exposed my breasts, which he then groped at. I poked him in the eye and ran, no easy task uphill in high heels over cobblestones. He runs after me, grabbing at me and trying to stop me, but I keep pushing him off, whacking him with my bag and hitting at him. We're getting closer to the lively part of town, and there's a few people about who clearly see me fighting this guy off, but do absolutely nothing to help or intervene. I guess people assumed we were a drunken couple having an argument. Not their business. He's still grabbing at me and trying to wrestle me to a stop at this point. I see bouncers standing outside the nearest club. I give my dodgy date another shove and run for the bouncers. I latched onto one of them and clung onto him for dear life as I told him what had happened. My date had caught up to me, was shouting his head off, calling me a bitch and a slut, and saying that I owed him. The next thing I know, the bouncer is whisking me inside. He takes me behind the bar and tells the bartender to call me a taxi, and to stay with me until I'm safely inside the taxi. She stays with me in the back room until my taxi arrives, and she smuggles me out of the back door as my date is still out front shouting his mouth off. The next day, I take a thank you card and a big box of chocolates to the bar to thank the staff for helping me. The same bartender from the night before was starting her shift when I showed up. She tells me that the guys kept shouting his head off, calling me every name under the sun, and ranting about how I owed him a fuck because he bought my dinner. He kept trying to push his way into the bar to find me, and eventually one of the bouncers got fed up with him and knocked him out cold. I went on a date with an insanely attractive girl I met on Tinder. First date was a coffee shop and quick chat. Not good but not bad. I enjoyed myself a bit, so I thought I'd give her another shot. Second date, she suggests we go grab a drink. I oblige her and take her to my favorite bar in my native Indianapolis. We both order vodka cocktails, the bar's specialty. So, I'm a slow drinker. I tend to drink maybe 1 to 2 drinks and call it a night. I've never really enjoyed the feeling of being drunk. I'm maybe a third of the way through my first drink when she's ordering her second. Later, when I finish my first and only drink, she's well into her third. 5 drinks, and close to $50 later, she's completely shit-faced and decides to ask me some very intrusive questions about my religious beliefs. Non-believer here. She then proceeds to chastise me quite loudly. Loudly enough that some of the bar staff and patrons are looking at us uncomfortably. My face had to have been as red as a baboon's ass, I'm sure. So at this point in time, I decided to politely nope my way out of such a horrid situation by saying, politely, I have to go. I'm not really having a good time now, and you're being very rude to me, so I think I'll use this opportunity to get out and count my losses. Her, well, you're an asshole anyway. You need to take me home, now. This is the part of the date where I decided to stand up for myself. Stupid me. Me, I have a better idea. How about you get an Uber driver to take you home? So I don't have to sit anywhere near your crazy ass. She throws what's left of her drink in my face and continues to yell even louder. I mouth the words check to my bartender because I was stupid enough to pay for the drinks by opening a tab with my credit card. I pay for the drinks and walk out without her. She screams at me again for walking away. We're outside and I'm making my way to my car and she's demanding that I take her home again. Mia, hello. Get an Uber. I'm not letting you anywhere near my car. She then admits to me that she can't get an Uber because she doesn't have enough money in her checking account to afford one. So on top of drunken lunatic, I'm here with a broke-ass post-college girl now. Out of desperation, I agree to pay for the Uber driver to take her home. She agrees and we spend the next few minutes in complete, total silence. The Uber driver finally rolls up and I open his rear passenger door for her to get in. She calls me the N-word in response. I'm white. She then says, I'm not riding in that Uber. I don't know this guy. He could be a serial killer or rapist or something. Me dude, just get in the goddamn car and go. Her, no longer angry, but almost breaking down into tears. Can't you just take me home? Please. Uber driver looks at me like I just punched his grandma. After some coaxing, I manage to talk her into getting into the Uber. I hop in my car and drive home, shaking with anger/self-pity/anxiety. Uber driver gives me a 1-star rating. I give him a $20 tip as a, I'm sorry for pawning this psycho on you tax. He re-ranks me as a 5-star. The next day, this girl texts me and apologizes for acting that way. She's had blah 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 happening in her life, and she gets angry when she drinks too much. I accepted her apology. She asks if we could hang out again soon. I sent her the most polite, absolutely fucking not, I could muster. She then started ridiculing me via text until I blocked her number. Met a guy on a dating app. He seemed nice enough, a shy metalhead, a nerd, so just my thing. After some days of texting, we decided to meet up. I told him I needed to go shopping because I wanted a new outfit for my birthday, and he said he would be happy to go with me because he knows some cool stores. I was a metalhead too at the time, but quite inexperienced, so I thought this would be a good idea. I meet him, and he is at least twice the size that his profile pictures showed. I tried not to be judgmental, and still give him a chance. We walk Trough Town, talk a bit, he seems kind of nice, it's okay. I buy some clothing, all is well. He asks if he might join me and my friends at the bar where I will celebrate. Which is odd because it's a birthday party and I've only known him for a week, but I say that he can stop by if he wants, because there are enough people that it's not that much of a big deal, and I know nearly everyone there, so even if he gets creepy, all is safe. In the last shop, he suddenly tells me that he needs to buy me something for my birthday. I say that that is not necessary since we only know each other for a week or so, but he insists. I say I want a bracelet or something like that, because that's something that is not too expensive. He tells me he will get one for me, but he wants to choose because it is his gift to me. And then he gets me this necklace thing with a ring on the front. You know, this kind of thing that shows off that you are the submissive part in a BDSM relationship. He buys it, gives it to me, and tells me that I should wear it at my birthday party. I tell him why this is inappropriate. I'm not going to walk around showing off some kinks in a bar. I know everyone, and the bartenders are like my fathers to me. He tells me that this is obviously not a real thing because it doesn't need a key to open, it's just for fun, and you will look stunning in it. Well, with that, I already feel awkward enough to end the date, and tell him that I want to go home. He asks me if I want to stay a bit longer and grab a coffee or something like that. I say no, I really want to go, it's getting late. After some more tries from him to get me to spend more time with him, I get free of him. So fast forward to my birthday. I hoped he won't show up, but he did. Tells me he is really sad that I didn't wear his necklace. Anyway, I have a good time talking with my friends, and my male best friend at the time starts a long conversation with that guy about some board game. I don't remember which it was. So I thought everything was fine and I talked to my other friends. Suddenly, the guy leaves. I'm pretty drunk by then, and don't really give it a second thought. An hour later I looked at my phone. There was a text on it saying, "I'm waiting outside. If you care about me, come out." From directly after he left. Thought he would be gone by now, and I wanted to go out to get some fresh air, so I went. He still stood there. After an hour. I'm really uncomfortable by now. He starts crying and telling me how his GF of 4 years cheated on him with his best friend, that he was suicidal, and that he really liked me, and it hurt so bad that I didn't spend time with him on my birthday, when 15 friends of mine were around which I've all known for years. I tell him that I'm sorry, but I don't think I'm able to give him what he wants. He says he will go home now, but I could come for Breakfast tomorrow. I tell him I don't want to. He tries to insist. He wants to make up for the drama he caused today. Said no again, walked back in, never heard of him again. This guy was completely creepy at the time. I mean, he was just a heartbroken guy with zero social skills. But still, this was for too creepy and cringeworthy for me. Back when I was about 20 years old, I decided to try my hand at online dating. This was at a time when the idea of meeting people over the internet was less commonplace than it is now. But I did manage to connect with a young woman who seemed, at first glance, like she might be a nice companion. She was tall and slender. She came across as being both fiercely intelligent and incredibly witty, and she wrote in a way that implied an appreciation for directness and rationality. She also had impeccable spelling and grammar, for which I have a somewhat unhealthy fondness. Even our interests were similar. Needless to say, I was practically smitten. The two of us exchanged about a dozen letters before deciding to meet in person, and when it came time for our date, I was feeling more than a little bit excited. If I'd known what would happen, though, I would have asked for the check with my meal. See, at first, we rehashed things that we'd already discussed, and that quickly gave way to new topics, one of which was childhood experiences, which is when things started to go off the rails. I can remember, she told me, going to McDonald's as a kid and ordering a Happy Meal just for the toy. Me too, I replied with a bit of embarrassment. Fortunately, I grew out of that compulsion. My date nodded her agreement. Yeah, I wouldn't even finish the meal. I'd take maybe 3 bites of the burger, leave the fries untouched, and then tell my mother that I was full. I never had a problem finishing my food, I answered. It wasn't the most interesting of conversations, but I was having a good time. Well, I grew out of it, said my date. I went through basic training when I was 18, and they forced me to always finish my meals. Now I can eat an entire Big Mac without stopping. Her eyes brightened, and she leaned forward. What's your favorite McDonald's burger? She asked. Now, I like a good burger. Hell, I love a good burger. A bacon cheeseburger with fresh, crisp onions and firm tomato slices might be my favorite meal. But as far as I'm concerned, McDonald's does not serve burgers. McDonald's sells copious amounts of salt and sugar that have been molded to look vaguely like a meat-based sandwich. I don't really eat at McDonald's, I said, but I do like... You don't eat at McDonald's? The urgency and the shock in my date's voice caught me off guard. No, not really, I said again. Not if I have a choice in the matter. This, for some reason, was the wrong thing to say. From that moment on, I was treated to nothing but averted eyes and monosyllabic responses. Each time that I tried to start the conversation back up, I found myself faced with a glare that would have made Medusa jealous. Even my attempts at finding out why McDonald's was so important to the girl were entirely fruitless, and by the end of the afternoon, I was worried that I'd somehow claimed to be a Nazi. The two of us parted ways immediately after the meal was over, without her so much as saying goodbye. I never heard from the young woman after that. The one email I sent, in which I apologized for offending her, but expressed my bewilderment as to how I'd done it, received no response. I've had people suggest that she was a stealth marketer of some sort, but that just doesn't seem right. Even so, sometimes I do still think of her when I hear that stupid jingle. I picked her up from her job at the airport. First clue should have been that she didn't really match her pictures. Not so much that it was catfishing, but she was a lot bigger than her photos suggested. She had also been pretty forward when we were texting, which I thought was great, but seems to have been misleading. It's important later. We went to this arcade place. The evening was fun, but I got that gut feeling that everything's not quite right with her. I figure I might be overthinking it and carry on. Later we went to a park nearby. It's pretty sizable, and we're looking for stuff to do, so she suggests we go for a walk, and I say sure. She's pretty out of shape, so we made it halfway up the hill before she had to take a break. It's at this exact moment that everything went sideways. She said she wanted to suck my dick. Right there. Halfway up a hill when it's 5C. In broad daylight. In sight of the parking lot. And also the busy road. Yeah, she'd been pretty forward before, but I think this might be taking it a bit too far. My brain kinda shut off at this point. I think the conflict between wanting head and not wanting people to see us just kinda short-circuited everything. I just kept repeating that people could see us. We head back down and get in the car. She asks what else we want to do. At this point, I just wanted the date to end and tell her I have to get up in the morning and want to go home. She's figured out that I'm not interested in another date. Cue the most uncomfortable 10-minute drive of my life. She keeps asking what she did wrong, where the evening went wrong, why I'm not interested when things were going so well earlier. I try my absolute best not to give any straight answers. I'm not really a confrontational person, and I just want the ride to be over. She switches to saying I'm not a real man, how I'm passing up something great, how she's such a wonderful person if I just got that chance to know her, how she's the mature one here. She also asks if it was because of her accent. She was an Indian immigrant who'd lived here for a few years. I barely noticed the accent, or her weight. She came back to this a few times. Get back to her work, and she gives me another lecture on how great she is, and then makes me delete all her contact info, which I'm more than happy to do, and then says that it hurt that I did that and she needs closure. It's been 10 whole minutes. I think closure takes a little longer than that. She texts me 5 minutes later with a giant all-caps paragraph. I mainly skimmed it, but the general theme was how much of an asshole I am, how I promised tonight would go great. I was trying to reassure her before the date when she said she was nervous. Lesson learned: don't make promises you can't keep. And that I must be gay to pass up a blowjob. 3 days later she calls me. I pick up the phone. It said no caller ID, so I figured there's a chance it could be someone else. And she asks if it's weird that she misses me. I hang up. Yes, it's weird. It's a first date. She tries calling again, and again after that. Haven't heard anything since, thank God.